The city of Vera wasn't the kind of place you'd call welcoming. Nestled in a valley between jagged, slate-gray mountains, it was a sprawl of crooked streets and looming brick towers, perpetually shrouded in a haze of coal smoke and drizzle. By day, it buzzed with the clatter of trams and the shouts of vendors hawking wares in the shadow of factories. By night, it sank into a restless quiet, broken only by the distant clang of machinery or the occasional bark of a stray dog. I'd lived there all my 29 years, in a cramped apartment above a tailor's shop, where the scent of wool and machine oil seeped through the floorboards. My name's Lyra Venz, and I'm a mechanic, not the glamorous kind, just the sort who keeps the trams running and the factory belts turning. It's steady work if you don't mind grease under your nails and the odd burn scar. The trouble started on a Tuesday in late autumn, when the leaves had long since abandoned the skeletal trees lining Vera's avenues. I'd been called out to the edge of town, near the old clock tower district, to fix a tram that had seized up on its tracks. The area wasn't one I frequented. Most folks avoided it. The district had been thriving once, back when the clock tower's massive gears still ticked out the hours, but that was decades ago. Now it was a maze of crumbling warehouses and empty lots, the tower itself a silent relic with a cracked face and hands frozen at 417. People said it stopped during a storm that killed half the workers building it, though no one could agree if that was true or just a tale spun to scare kids. I arrived at the tram just as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky a bruised purple. The vehicle was a hulking thing, all rivets and rust, stalled halfway across a bridge that spanned the murky Vera River. My toolbox clanked as I set it down, and I got to work, prying open the undercarriage to check the motor. The air was sharp with the bite of coming frost, and my breath puffed out in little clouds as I muttered curses at the stubborn bolts. That's when I heard it, a low, resonant hum, like the sound of a tuning fork struck underwater. It wasn't the tram. I'd killed its power the moment I started. No, this came from somewhere else, vibrating through the bridge's metal frame and up into my boots. I straightened, wiping my hands on my overalls, and scanned the dimming horizon. The hum grew louder, pulsing in time with my heartbeat, and I traced it back toward the clock tower. Its silhouette loomed a few streets away, black against the fading light, and for a moment I swore I saw a flicker in its broken face, like a candle flaring behind the glass. I shook my head. Tricks of the eye, I told myself. Fatigue from a long shift. But the hum didn't stop, and curiosity, or maybe stupidity, pulled me toward it. The streets to the tower were narrow and uneven, paved with cobblestones that hadn't been touched in years. Weeds sprouted between them, and the buildings on either side leaned inward as if conspiring to block out the sky. My boots echoed too loudly in the stillness, and I kept my wrench in hand, not because I expected trouble, but because the weight of it felt reassuring. The hum was a constant now, threading through the air like a needle, and as I rounded a corner, the clock tower came into full view. Up close, it was even more imposing. Easily 10 stories tall, its brickwork stained with moss and soot. The entrance was a rusted gate, half ajar, and beyond it, a spiral staircase vanished into shadow. I shouldn't have gone in. Every sensible part of me screamed to turn back, finish the tram job, and head home to my lumpy mattress and a cup of tea. But that flicker I'd seen gnawed at me, and the hum was practically singing now, tugging at something deep in my chest. I pushed the gate open with a screech of metal and stepped inside. The air was damp and heavy, smelling of mildew and something faintly metallic. The staircase wound upward, its steps worn smooth by time, and I climbed, one hand on the wall to steady myself. The hum grew sharper with every step, buzzing in my teeth until I reached the top, a cavernous chamber where the clock's guts should have been. Instead, there was nothing, no gears, no pendulums, just an empty space with a single window where the clock face stared out over Vera. The glass was shattered, letting in drafts that whistled through the room, and in the center stood a figure. Not a person, at least not anymore. It was a statue, life-sized, carved from some dark stone I couldn't name. It depicted a woman in a long coat, her head tilted back as if gazing at the sky, one arm outstretched with a clenched fist. Her face was featureless, smoothed flat like a river stone, and yet I felt watched. The hum was deafening here, radiating from her, and I realized it wasn't just sound, it was words, too faint to catch, but they're all the same. I took a step closer, my wrench slipping in my sweaty grip. "Hello?" I said, voice cracking. Stupid, I know, talking to a statue. But the silence demanded something. The hum shifted, and for a heartbeat I thought I heard my name, Lyra, woven into it. I froze, pulse hammering, and then the statue's fist unclenched. A small object dropped to the floor with a dull clink, rolling toward me. I bent to pick it up, a brass key, no bigger than my thumb, etched with tiny, spiraling symbols I didn't recognize. The moment my fingers closed around it, the hum stopped. The silence was so abrupt I stumbled, catching myself against the wall. I should have left then, dropped the key and bolted, but I didn't. I pocketed it, telling myself I'd figure it out later, and hurried back down the stairs. Outside, the night had thickened, stars swallowed by clouds, and I made it to the tram in a daze. The repair went quick. Loose wiring, nothing major, and I was home by midnight, key burning a hole in my pocket. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I kept seeing that faceless statue, hearing my name in the hum, and when I finally drifted off, I dreamed of gears turning backward, grinding the city to dust. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. Work waited, and Vera didn't care about my nightmares. But the key stayed with me, tucked into my coat, and every so often, I'd catch myself running a finger over its strange markings. Days passed, 3, maybe 4, and I might have convinced myself it was nothing, except the city started changing. Not big things, not at first. A street lamp near my place flickered in a rhythm it never had before. The trams I fixed broke down again within hours, always in ways that made no sense. Parts rusted overnight, bolts sheared clean through, and the air felt heavier, like it was waiting for something. Then came the whispers. I heard them first on a foggy evening, walking home from the repair yard. A low murmur, like a crowd just out of sight, threading through the mist. I stopped, turning in circles, but the streets were empty. The whispers followed me home, too soft to make out, and when I locked my door, they seemed to press against the walls. I told myself it was exhaustion or the wind playing tricks, but deep down I knew better. It was the key. I took it out that night, set it on my kitchen table, and stared at it under the dim bulb swinging overhead. The symbols glinted, almost shifting if I looked too long, and the whispers grew louder, insistent. I didn't sleep. Instead, I went back to the clock tower at dawn, key in hand, driven by a mix of fear and a need to understand. The district was quieter than before, the air thick with fog that clung to my skin. Inside, the statue hadn't moved, but the room felt different, smaller, tighter, like it was closing in. I held up the key, half expecting nothing, and said, "What are you?" My voice echoed, and the whispers surged, resolving into a single phrase. "Turn it back." Before I could process that, a panel slid open in the statue's base, revealing a keyhole. My hand shook as I fit the key in and turned it. The tower shuddered. A deep groan rolled through the floor, and outside, the clock hands twitched. First backward, then forward, settling at 4:18. The whispers became a roar, and I saw flashes in the fog beyond the window, shapes moving, tall and angular, like machines come to life. I yanked the key out, and the noise stopped, but the damage was done. Over the next week, Vera unraveled. Trams derailed without cause. Factory pipes burst, flooding streets with scalding steam. People vanished, first 1 or 2, then dozens, leaving behind only shadows burned into walls. And those shapes I'd glimpsed? They were real, towering constructs of steel and wire, stalking the city at night, silent except for the grind of their joints. I tried to fix it, went back to the tower, turned the key again, but each twist made it worse. Time itself seemed to fracture, days looping or skipping entirely. The statue never moved, but I felt its presence, heavy and judging. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, just ran from the machines, and searched for answers in Vera's rotting libraries.